Something was pulling at my boot, and it was not letting go. I opened my eyes to darkness and the smell of wet moss, and for 1 second I could not remember where I was. Then the memory came back fast and heavy. I was on Verdant Reach, alone, 3 days deep in the forest, with a survey team that had stayed back on the ship because the air readings scared them more than they scared me. I had walked until my legs gave out, found a hollow between 2 giant roots, and fallen asleep before I could even finish my ration bar. Now something had my boot in its mouth. I did not move. Every lesson from training told me the same thing. Do not jerk. Do not shout. Let your eyes adjust before your body decides anything for you. So I lay still, heart hammering, and let the shapes in the dark slowly turn into something I could understand. There were 4 of them, small, low to the ground, covered in short, dense fur that looked silver in the little moonlight coming through the canopy. Their heads were shaped like something between a wolf and a lizard, and even in the dark I could see the shine of teeth that were far too sharp for something so small. One of them had my boot. Another was lying flat across my chest, rising and falling with my own breathing, like it had simply decided that spot belonged to it now. I knew what these were. Every person on the survey ship had sat through the same briefing. Vantar. Apex pack hunters, native to this continent, fast enough to catch anything that ran, and strong enough to bring down animals 3 times their own size before they were even a year old. The final slide of that briefing had one line burned into my memory. Never approach a den. Never approach cubs without an adult in clear sight, because an adult is always close, and an adult will not ask questions first. I turned my head, slow as I could manage, and searched the tree line. Nothing. No shape in the dark, no eyes catching the light, no low warning sound. Just 4 cubs, and me, and a whole lot of forest that suddenly felt much bigger than it had that afternoon. I did not know if that was good news or the worst news of my life. The cub on my boot let go, and made a strange rusty sound, like metal scraping metal, and immediately, the other 3 cubs turned toward me. The one on my chest lifted its head and looked straight into my eyes. Its own eyes were huge, gold, and completely without fear. It studied me for a moment, like it was deciding something important, then let out a short, sharp chirp and flopped back down onto me like nothing at all had happened. I forced my breathing to slow down. Panic was not going to help me here. If these were truly cubs from a den nearby, then somewhere close there was a mother who could end my entire survey career in about 4 seconds. My best chance, my only real chance, was to become the most boring thing in this clearing. No sudden moves, no loud sounds, nothing that looked like a threat, and nothing that looked like food trying to escape. So I lay there, in the dark, on an alien planet, being slowly climbed on by 4 juvenile predators, and I made a decision that felt completely insane, even as I made it. I was going to wait this out. Whatever this was, running was not an option. My legs were shaking, my supplies were half gone, and I was at least 6 hours from any kind of rescue signal reaching my team. The cub that had chewed my boot lost interest in it, and instead found my hand. It sniffed my fingers, then closed its jaw around 2 of them. I braced for pain that never came. The bite had almost no pressure behind it, like a young dog testing a toy rather than a predator testing a meal. That told me something important, something that eased just a fraction of the terror sitting in my chest. These cubs were not hunting me, they were playing. A second cub found my hair and pulled at it with obvious delight, chirping every time a strand came loose. A third wedged itself into the gap between my arm and my side and pressed in so tightly that I could feel its heartbeat, fast and steady against my ribs. The fourth, the one on my chest, had started to purr, low and rough, like an engine deciding whether to start. I had never in my life imagined I would be lying in the dirt of another planet, silently praying that a pack of alien predator children would keep thinking I was furniture. But that was exactly where I was, and every second that passed without an attack felt like a small, fragile kind of luck. Then I heard it. A branch cracked somewhere past the tree line, followed by the soft, heavy sound of something large, moving through undergrowth without any effort to hide the fact. My whole body went rigid. The purring cub on my chest did not react at all, which somehow made it worse. If a predator were approaching to attack, surely the cubs would scatter, or freeze, or show some sign of alarm. Instead, they stayed exactly where they were, warm and calm, and completely unbothered, and that told me the sound belonged to someone they already trusted completely. I turned my head toward the noise and found her. She stepped out from between two trees, and even in the dim light I could tell she was enormous, easily the size of a large horse, with shoulders that moved like coiled muscle under short silver fur. Her head was low, her ears pressed slightly back, and her eyes, when they found mine, held an expression I did not have any experience translating. This had to be the mother. There was no other explanation for the way the cubs had settled the moment they heard her. I held completely still and did the only thing the training had ever told me to do in a moment like this. I kept my eyes on her without staring in challenge, kept my breathing steady, kept my hands open and visible, even with two cubs still holding on to them. "I am not attacking you," I tried to say with every part of my body that could speak without words. "I am not running from you either. I am simply here, and this was not my idea." She walked closer, slow and deliberate, each step careful enough that not a single twig snapped under her weight. My mind was screaming at me to do something, anything, but my body understood something my panic did not. Sudden movement here would end everything, so I stayed still, watching her get closer and closer, until she was standing directly over me, close enough that I could feel the warmth coming off her body and hear the low, steady rhythm of her breathing. She looked down at me. She looked at the pile of cubs treating me like a nest. Then, slowly, impossibly, her ears came forward instead of staying flat, and the tension in her shoulders eased. She lowered herself to the ground beside me, with a sound like a great weight finally being set down, and rested her head near my feet. The purring cub on my chest purred louder, almost like it was answering her. I lay there frozen, staring up at the canopy, trying to understand what had just happened, while an apex predator large enough to end me in a single motion settled beside me, like I was simply part of the family now. I did not sleep again that night. Not really. I drifted in and out, always aware of the warm weight of cubs shifting against me, and the steady breathing of their mother close by. Every time I stirred, one of the cubs would stir too, resettle, and go still again, as if checking that I was still there. As if I mattered to them the way anything familiar matters to a child in the dark. When the first gray light of morning came through the trees, I finally understood something the survey briefings had never mentioned. I had read that Vontar hunted in coordinated groups, that mothers took turns hunting, while other members of the pack guarded the den. What none of the briefings had explained was what happened when a mother needed to leave her cubs completely alone, with no other pack member nearby to watch them. She did not leave them alone, she left them with me. Somehow, sometime in the night, I had stopped being a stranger sleeping in the wrong place, and had become something else entirely, something warm, and still, and safe enough to trust with her children while she went to hunt. I had been quiet. I had not run. I had let myself be climbed on and pulled and chewed without flinching, and in some way I did not fully understand. That had been enough. The mother rose to her feet not long after sunrise, stretched in a long, slow motion that reminded me of any large animal waking up, and looked at me one more time. There was no threat left in her posture at all. She gave a short, low sound, almost like a command, and then turned and walked back into the trees, disappearing as silently as she had arrived. The cubs did not follow her. They stayed exactly where they were, piled on top of me, completely unconcerned by her leaving. I lay there in the growing light, staring at the canopy above me, trying to process the fact that I had somehow been left in charge of 4 young apex predators on an alien continent with no training for this situation whatsoever. My communicator was somewhere in my pack, several feet away, and I did not dare move enough to reach it without waking the cub currently using my collarbone as a pillow. So I waited, and while I waited, I studied them properly for the first time in daylight. The one that had chewed my boot had a pale patch of fur across one shoulder, shaped almost like a leaf. The one on my chest, the one who had purred through the entire night, had eyes a shade darker gold than the others, and a habit of pressing its nose against my jaw every few minutes, like it was checking that I was still breathing. The 2 smaller ones, curled together near my side, looked almost identical, except that one had a slightly longer tail. I decided, somewhere in that quiet gray morning, that I could not keep thinking of them as simply cubs, 1, 2, 3, and 4. It felt wrong after everything, to think of them as nothing more than a survey entry. So without any real plan, I gave them names in my head. The one on my chest, with the dark gold eyes and the endless purring, I called Ash. The boot chewer with the leaf-shaped patch became Fern. The two smaller ones, always together, became Pip and Wren. It was strange how quickly the fear had faded into something else entirely. I was still aware, every second, that these were dangerous animals capable of growing into hunters strong enough to take down creatures far larger than me. But lying there in the early light, feeling Ash's steady purring against my chest, and Fern's small weight pressed against my leg, it was difficult to feel afraid. What I felt instead was something closer to responsibility. Whatever had happened in the night, whatever strange trust had been built between one exhausted human and a family of alien predators, I was not going to break it now. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, and the forest around us slowly came alive with sound. Distant calls I did not recognize. The rustle of unseen creatures moving through the canopy above. The cubs woke properly not long after sunrise, and what followed was nothing like the calm stillness of the night. Ash discovered that my hair made an excellent object to bat at. Fern rediscovered my boots, and this time managed to work the laces loose entirely. Pip and Wren took turns climbing over my legs, like I was simply a very warm, very patient hill. At one point, Fern found my canteen, lying just out of reach, where it had rolled from my pack. I watched, half amused and half worried, as the cub worked at the cap with sharp little teeth for a solid 5 minutes before finally twisting it free. The triumph on that small face was unmistakable, right up until the water spilled directly across my stomach in one cold rush. Fern looked utterly delighted with the result. I did not have the heart to be annoyed. By mid-morning I had managed, very carefully, to reach my communicator without disturbing the cub asleep against my collarbone too much. My hands were shaking, partly from exhaustion and partly from the strange unreality of the whole night, as I sent a short message back toward the ship with my coordinates, and 3 words that I knew would cause chaos back at base. Found juvenile Vantar pack. Unharmed. Need guidance. The response came faster than I expected, in a voice I recognized immediately. It belonged to Daniel, our field communications officer, and he did not sound calm at all. "Say that again," he said. I slowly. I told him everything, as quietly as I could while Wren gnawed thoughtfully on the edge of my sleeve. 4 Vantar cubs, an adult female who had approached, watched me, and then left without any sign of aggression. No injuries, no attack. Just 4 sleeping predators using me as furniture, and a mother who had apparently decided I was trustworthy enough to babysit her children while she hunted. There was a long silence on the other end before Daniel spoke again, and this time there was something careful in his voice, like he was trying not to say the wrong thing and spook whatever fragile situation I had found myself in. "Do not move unless you have to," he said. "We are sending a small team, on foot, quiet approach. If that mother comes back and sees strangers rushing toward her cubs, this could go very wrong very fast." He was right, and I knew it. Whatever trust had been built between me and this family had been built slowly, in silence, over an entire night. It would not survive a team of nervous humans crashing through the undergrowth with weapons half raised. So I waited again, cub, and I kept the cubs calm the only way I knew how, by staying calm myself. I talked to them quietly, even though I knew they could not understand a single word. I told them about the ship, about the crew waiting anxiously somewhere behind a radio, about a life so different from theirs that it might as well have come from another universe entirely, which in a way, it had. Ash seemed to like the sound of my voice more than any of the others. Every time I spoke, the purring grew louder, and the small head would tilt in a way that almost looked thoughtful. I found myself talking longer than I needed to, not because it helped keep them calm, but because somewhere in that long, strange morning, I had genuinely started to enjoy their company. It was nearly midday when I heard careful footsteps approaching, along with the low murmur of at least 2 voices trying very hard to stay quiet. I recognized Grace first, our field medic, moving with slow, deliberate steps between the trees, followed closely by Henry, our team lead, who looked like he had aged 5 years since the last time I had seen him. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, staring at the sight in front of them with expressions I will remember for the rest of my life. There I was, soaked from spilled water, hair pulled loose from Ash's earlier attention, completely covered in sleeping and half-sleeping predator cubs, looking as calm as if I were simply relaxing in a park somewhere back home. "Do not come any closer yet," I said quietly, and to their credit, they listened. We stayed like that for a long while, them at the edge of the clearing and me in the middle of it, until finally I felt it was safe enough to try moving. Slowly, carefully, I eased myself up onto one elbow, and the cubs stirred but did not panic, shifting instead to settle around the new position like water finding its level. It took almost another hour of careful, quiet movement before I was finally sitting upright, with Ash curled contentedly in my lap, and the other three arranged around me like a small silver-colored guard. Henry and Grace approached slowly, keeping low, keeping their voices soft, and the cubs watched them with curious golden eyes but no real fear. "We do not know where the mother is," I told them quietly, "but she trusted me with them. I do not think we should take that trust and throw it away by rushing this." Grace nodded slowly, clearly fascinated, despite the tension still written across her face. Henry looked less certain, glancing repeatedly toward the tree line as if expecting the mother to appear at any second, which honestly, she might have. We waited together for another hour, the four of us, and four cubs, until finally the same low, heavy sound of movement I had heard the night before returned. The mother stepped out from the trees exactly where she had disappeared that morning, and this time she was not alone. Behind her, moving with the same careful silent steps, was a second adult, slightly smaller, with a scar running along one shoulder. Erie went very still beside me. Grace's hand drifted toward her medical kit out of pure instinct rather than any real plan. I stayed exactly where I was, with Ash still curled in my lap, and simply looked at the mother the same way I had the night before. She looked back at me, then at Henry and Grace, then finally down at her cubs, still calm, still unharmed, still gathered safely around the strange creature that had somehow become part of their world overnight. Something in her posture eased. She gave a low call, and one by one the cubs untangled themselves from me and moved toward her, Ash last of all, pausing just long enough to press its nose against my hand, one final time, before bounding off to join its family. I watched them disappear back into the trees, the two adults and four cubs moving together, with an ease and trust that made the whole forest feel a little less dangerous than it had the day before. Then I turned to Henry and Grace, both of whom were staring at me like I had grown a second head overnight. "You are going to have a very difficult time writing this one up for the official report," Grace said finally, and despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the soaked clothes and the bite marks I would find on my canteen strap for months afterward, I laughed for the first time in what felt like days. We walked back to camp together, slower than usual, mostly because I kept glancing over my shoulder toward the trees, half hoping to catch one more glimpse of silver fur and golden eyes. I never saw them again after that morning, not once in the remaining weeks of the survey, though sometimes late at night I thought I heard a familiar rusty chirping sound somewhere far off in the dark. The official report took 3 separate drafts before anyone back at Central Command believed a word of it, and even then, most of them only believed it once they saw the footage recorded from my communicator during those final quiet hours in the clearing. I still keep that recording, watching it sometimes, when I need reminding that trust, real trust, can be built in the strangest of circumstances, between the strangest of creatures, without a single word ever being spoken. I never did file a hazard report about the bite marks on my fingers, or the ruined canteen strap. Some things, I decided, were worth more as memories than as paperwork.